Starting to happen.
You are live.
We are live.
Hello. We are a couple minutes early because you can tell it looks a little different around here. This is our first time using this new software to do Facebook and YouTube lives. So I wanted to pop on a couple minutes early to try to work out any tech issues that we have. Hopefully things are going to go smoothly. I've got John in the background helping out here. So you might hear him helping me sort out some things. He's going to be running the show behind the scenes for me, helping out. We've got 6 people joined already. Awesome. So this is the new look around here. I hope you like it. We were accepting some questions ahead of time, so I've got those queued up. But certainly you are more than welcome to throw some comments into the chat as I start talking. I think everything looks good. We've already got 10 people, looks like, joined. So that's awesome. I'm excited to have everybody here. Hope you like the new look. I'm excited to have it. John, what do we think? Hi, Moira. Are we ready to go? It's almost 8 o'clock. We're about a minute early. Hi, Tafe. Got your question. You were the last one that we added to the list. It's 8 o'clock now, so I think, can we get started?
Yes, let's get started and keep an eye on that private chat.
Okay, got it. Okay, so I've got new look, new camera. We're ready to go. So tonight I am going to be talking about desensitization. I'm going to be talking about desensitization and separation anxiety and stranger danger. And then at the end, if there's a little bit of time left, certainly any other open questions I'm happy to take. So desensitization, what is that? It is a technique originally developed by behavioral psychologists that treat people with phobias and fears to help break down the thing that people are afraid of into little bite-sized pieces that make it manageable for people to learn to cope with their fears. So as dog trainers, we use systematic desensitization to help dogs learn to cope with phobias of things like being left alone, so separation anxiety, and we use it with stranger danger, teaching dogs to be less afraid of unfamiliar people. For separation anxiety, we only use desensitization. So with things like stranger danger, we often bundle desensitization with counter conditioning. So we bundle that with some food. So we not only desensitize them, but we also bundle that with food to help them start to create some positive associations. But with separation anxiety, we don't want to throw food into the mix early on because that can really complicate things. With separation anxiety dogs, some dogs can get so distracted by the food that we don't get a really accurate read on whether they're truly comfortable being left alone or whether they're just really into their food. So we work through systematic desensitization. It's a really deliberate, can be really slow process to teach them that absences and being left alone are nothing to be afraid of. And we break up what being left alone means into these tiny little pieces. So when we say a dog is afraid of being left alone, what does that really mean? It can mean that they're afraid of being left alone for X period of time. So the length of time they're left alone is a factor, but sometimes a lot of dogs start to pick up on clues that predict that they're going to be left alone. So things like picking up your keys or putting your shoes on or putting a jacket on, those are all pre-departure cues that lead up to absences. So when I'm working with a dog with separation anxiety, a lot of times all of those little cues and clues to the dogs need to be worked in to the training plan, and they need to be desensitized to all of those little pieces. So a training plan for a separation anxiety dog sometimes might start with a second or two of the person just walking to the door, touching the doorknob, and going and returning back to the dog. It really depends on where that dog's threshold is, where their safety point is for being left alone, and what those other clues are that they are worried about that predict when the dog is being left, that predict when they might be left alone. So I do an initial assessment for separation anxiety dogs to find where that safety threshold is. And then I build a training plan, a desensitization plan around that. This past week, I released a handout, a guide for separation anxiety. It's free to download on the website. It's 5 things that you might see online or advice you might be given from friends or family, well-meaning advice that people suggest might help with your separation anxiety dogs that actually don't help and might actually make things worse. So that's free to download on the website. The link will be in the chat box for you if you want to grab that. It's a great handout. I've been working on it for a couple months. It's beautiful. It's 17 pages. There's 5 things. So I suggest you pop over and grab that. So that's a free resource that is available to you. So that's a good place to start if you think your dog might have separation anxiety. We also use separation anxiety with stranger danger. We use desensitization with stranger danger. Can use desensitization with dogs who are afraid of noises. We use it in lots of situations where dogs are afraid of things. Anything that a dog is afraid of, we never intentionally expose them to the full intensity of the thing that they're afraid of. So if a dog is afraid of strangers, for instance, we would never intentionally throw them into a room full of strangers. So if your dog is afraid of children, you're not going to take them to a preschool and throw them into a room full of kids. That would be way too much and way too dangerous, and that would be a terrible idea. Instead, we're going to find ways to break down kids or strangers or men. If your dog has particular sensitivity to a certain type of stranger, as some dogs do, we're going to find ways to break that scary thing down into manageable pieces that the dog can handle. With strangers in particular, distance is usually one of the big things that we can play around with and manipulate that can help the dog feel safe. So if a dog is afraid of strangers, they probably at some distance feel safe around strangers. It might be a football field length away, where strangers are at one end of the football field and the dog is at the end. And that might be a completely safe distance for that dog. And if that's the amount of distance it takes, that's our starting point. And then we work to close the gap to get that dog closer and closer and closer to those strangers. If it's kids, we do the same sort of thing. We might hang out near a park where the dog can hear or see kids from a very safe distance, but we wouldn't let the dog have any close interactions because those interactions would be way too dangerous and scary for the dog. So I think we had some questions that were submitted prior about stranger danger. We want to bring those up. John, you want to bring those questions up? Okay, Barbara submitted this by email. Our rescue is terrified of strangers. When our plumber or electrician has to come over to fix something, he goes crazy barking. I put him in another room and stay with him, but would really like to know how to handle this better. My friend also has a rescue pup who crawls under furniture when a stranger comes into her home. Seems like the same fear, but different ways of coping. That's exactly right. So not every dog or every human who is afraid of something, that fear may not manifest in the same way. So I could be afraid of spiders and I might be nervous and chew my fingers, or I might cry, and someone else might be afraid of spiders and scream and run out of the room. So we might manifest that fear in different ways. So barking and trying to keep the stranger away might be one manifestation that one dog might show if they're afraid. Another dog might have a flight response and try to avoid that stranger entirely and hide and try to get away from the stranger and create distance. In both of those cases, it's possible that dog is afraid. For both of those situations, we would want to help those dogs be comfortable with those strangers, plumbers, electricians, people who are not familiar, who we're not going to be able to practice a lot with. Those tend to be harder individuals to work with, where you're not going to have a lot of repetitions to be able to have the plumber or electrician come over frequently to give the dog rehearsals with that person. So often with sort of repairmen and people that are transient, often I will recommend that we just kind of put those dogs away, keep them safe, manage them, put them in a crate or put them in another room, maybe with a long-lasting chew or a frozen Kong or something like that to keep them busy and occupied while we're working on training with individuals that we can recruit and give the dog some really strategic, deliberate practice. We also don't want to have any unfortunate incidents where a repair person comes over and the dog is afraid and maybe lunges or bites. We definitely don't want to have that. So certainly safety and management is always top priority. So what you're doing to put him in another room and keep him safe, kudos for doing that. As far as working on it and your friend's dog who hides under the furniture, we want to do whatever we need to do to keep the dog feeling safe. So your friend's dog who's hiding under the furniture, we want to let that dog escape. We would never want to pull that dog out from under the furniture and sort of force them to have that interaction. If that dog is hiding, they're clearly communicating they're afraid. They don't want to have that interaction. If we force them out of that situation, that safety hiding space that they have, and we're forcing them to have that interaction, we're really setting them up to fail and to either put them into a situation where they feel they have to bite to get out of that situation. So we definitely don't want to do that, but we do want to maybe feed in that situation to help teach them that, strangers predict good stuff. We want to help create distance. So if there's a way that you can have the dog away where they can still see the stranger from a safe distance and you can be feeding and happy talking to help diffuse that situation, help settle the dog a little bit. Those are all positive steps that you can take. But really, to help a dog with stranger danger, we need to do very deliberate, structured training sessions where we're setting up the environment so that we can control it and we can introduce the dog to strangers in a very controlled environment so that we can manipulate those parameters, the distance, and other factors that can come into play are, some dogs are sensitive about how tall the person is or what the person looks like. A couple weeks ago, I did a blog post on dogs and racism. So some dogs are sensitive to people who look different if they haven't been properly socialized to a variety of races. Some dogs may be a little more sensitive about people who look a particular way. Some dogs are sensitive with people who have beards or have glasses, or if they're really tall or the person has, if it's a tall man with a deep voice. Some dogs might be more sensitive or afraid of those types of people. So we really want to have a good picture of the sensitivities that particular dog has and then build a training plan around that. So we can manipulate different parameters. So distance, like I said, is the number one thing that we can play around with to help keep the dog safe. What the person is doing. So a person sitting or standing still tends to be a lot less threatening to a dog than a person who's running or being loud or really animated, moving their arms. A person sitting perfectly still, a lot less threatening than a person who suddenly stands up or leaves a room and re-enters a room. So we can play around with that. Sometimes for things like noise, volume is something that we would play around with. So if your dog is afraid of noises, thunderstorms, or babies crying, or children playing, things like that, the intensity of that sound is going to be something that we would play around with in the desensitization process. So the volume and manipulating that volume, whether we're using audio recordings or whether we're using physical distance from a playground or something like that to control the volume in a physical sense. So we would control all of those parameters as much as we possibly could in the context of a controlled training session when we're working with stranger danger. And that's really the best way and the only way to help a dog with stranger danger, to teach them that strangers predict good things, and that if we're setting those situations up and they're reliable and predictable, that we're really setting the dog up for success and teaching them good things. Tave asked on Facebook another question about stranger danger, specifically fear of men. Tave volunteers for a local rescue, so I'm sure this comes up a lot. Help the dog become less fearful of men, especially in a household or foster home. So yes, so this often comes back to lack of socialization, which I wrote a 4-week blog series on fear in dogs a couple weeks ago. And one of the places fear in dogs comes from is lack of socialization. So if you have a dog who was not properly socialized, like I was saying, to different variety of people and races and people who look different, shapes and sizes and all that stuff, dogs can be less comfortable around those unfamiliar types of people. So if you have a dog who maybe was only raised with a single woman and is suddenly put into a home with men, that can be really scary for that dog. So in a home especially, the dog doesn't have a lot of escape options. And sometimes, the man or people in the home are trying to bond and be really nice to the dog, and they are very well intentioned, but sometimes they're coming on a little too strong for the dog, and the dog really just needs space and they need time to settle in. And the people trying to be well intentioned and trying to sort of win the dog over and show them that they mean well by shoving food in their face or trying to play with them, if the dog is really fearful and really doesn't want anything to do with those people, those well-intentioned acts are actually scaring the dog more than they're helping the dog. So I generally advise just letting the dog call the shots and really not trying to force yourself on the dog. If the dog wants to engage with you, you will know. The dog will come over, they'll be loose, they'll be waggy, they'll be soliciting attention from us. If they're hiding, if they're staying on the other side of the room, we can maybe toss food from a distance, so really high value chicken or cheese or hot dogs, things like that, from a safe distance, but you do not want to try to hand deliver that food. So one of the big mistakes that people make with dogs who are afraid of people is that they think, and I completely understand why people think this, they think, my dog's afraid of people, I'm going to have my friend try to hand feed my dog. What they don't realize in that process is that the proximity that your friend needs to get to be close enough to hand feed your dog is probably too close for your dog to feel safe. So if your dog is afraid of strangers and I'm going to hand feed your dog, I need to get really close to your dog to be able to hand feed and deliver that food. And that scared dog, that proximity is way too close. So I've had a couple dogs before they were my clients where the people tried that. The dog took the food and then bit the hand because they were conflicted. They really wanted the high value food, took the food, and then realized the hand was way too close to their face and then bit the hand. So we don't want to set up the dog into this conflict situation. So if the dog is not being overtly pro-social and soliciting attention, we want to give them as much space and distance as needed. You can toss high value food. You can, try to make yourself small, sitting on the floor, happy talking, keeping yourself as small as possible, basically, and really giving the dog as much time and space as they need to approach you and to decide that you're safe. If you are too active or too in their face, it's probably, even if you're well-meaning, it's going to probably scare them more. So especially if it's a foster dog and they've been bounced around, they were transported, they were pulled out of a shelter, they were in a foster home, now they're in a new foster home, and they've been kind of all over. We need to give that dog time to decompress, and we need to just really let that dog settle in and find its bearings before we start having too many expectations of this dog. So having some patience, even if you really want to bond with this dog, we need to let that happen on the dog's time. But tossing food at a distance, having the man be the deliverer of meals and fun stuff, if that's not super scary for the dog, if the dog is willing to go on a walk with that man, if it's not super scary, then having those fun activities and the man be involved in that, then that would be fine. But if the dog is very fearful of the man, then we would need to revisit that. Susan has a question about fear of noises and walking. New York, in the past year, we had fireworks. Oh yeah, during COVID, there was fireworks almost every day from May to September. Yes, you are not alone. There were a lot of dogs that were traumatized by those daily fireworks. Okay. Yes. Okay. So fear of fireworks, fear of noises, that is often a genetic condition. I did also write about that during my fear blog series that I did. Fear of noises often requires medication from your vet. So that might be something that you want to discuss with your vet. If those noises are affecting daily quality of life, or you're not able to walk your dog, that is something that I might suggest that you talk to your vet about. If you can isolate that it's fireworks or trucks backfiring or, big bangs, that is something that we could desensitize and counter condition. We could work with audio recordings and do some really low volume audio recordings and start doing some at-home controlled training with those recordings to try to start build up some positive associations and work with that. But if the sort of trauma that happened during those few months of the fireworks going off and having to be walked during that period really sort of had a permanent sort of long-lasting effect, and now it's generalized and he won't go on walks even when there's not noises, or that if he hears a tiny little noise, now he's pulling to go back home. I would think that that's a bigger quality of life issue that might need some medication to help get him over that hump while you're simultaneously doing training. So medication is never the solution on its own. It's always done in tandem with a behavior modification plan. So medication's not sort of this silver bullet that you just medicate a dog and that's it, and you don't have to do anything else. It's always in tandem with behavior modification. But if a dog is so anxious and fearful that they can't sort of focus and they won't take food, medication can get that anxiety level down to a manageable level so that training can be efficient and effective, and it can just help the process go a lot more smoothly. So I would probably recommend that you first talk to your vet about some situational medication for that. It may not need to be a permanent sort of long-term thing. It may just be to sort of get them over this hump while you do some training, and then you can make a decision with your vet about where that goes sort of long-term. If you're out on a walk and he's pulling and he needs to go home, because he gets frightened, certainly you do want to let him go there. You don't want to force him to stay out in a scary situation. That's not going to help him get over that fear. It's just going to make him more afraid of being outside if he's sort of forced to endure being outside and he's afraid. So if he is frightened while you're outside in the middle of a walk and he wants to run home, that is the right thing to do, to let him go home. If he hasn't pottied, maybe setting up an indoor grass patch or a potty patch where he has the ability to do that inside, where it's a safer environment. Walking off peak hours, before it gets a little dark or dusk, before those fireworks or booms start happening. I know it gets dark pretty early now, but trying to structure your walks around those sort of off-peak times when those scary things are less likely to happen, so that he has opportunities to potty, and sort of shifting that schedule a little bit. But giving him an indoor potty area could help, even if it's for short term. Sometimes transporting the dog, whether it's in a bag, if he's small enough, or a stroller, to a park or a quieter area, can be really helpful sometimes. So I have a lot of clients who are afraid to walk on city streets, but if they can go to a park, they can get to Prospect Park, or they can get to Central Park, then they're much more comfortable. So some clients will carry them or drive them or put them in a big stroller and cart them there. And once they get to the park, the dog is much more comfortable. So we can then give the dog an opportunity for potty and exercise. And then sometimes we can start to back chain that a little bit. And then sometimes we can get the dog walking back home and start building, some positive stuff, walking from the park to home where they were too afraid to walk from home to the park. And then hopefully that answers that question. We've got another question from Susan about fear of vets and groomers. I'm actually doing a blog post next week about this, about dogs who are afraid of nail trims and vets. So that is going to get posted on Monday. Dogs being afraid of vets and groomers is not unusual. Often dogs, when they go to the vet or groomer, they get restrained, and restraint for dogs is really scary. They're prevented from moving, they're prevented from leaving if they are afraid. So those scary situations of not being able to move, causes anxiety. Also, if they've been injured or hurt, they go to the vet, they get injections and that can hurt, or they get poked and prodded and manipulated. And if they have arthritis or they're having an ortho exam, sometimes that can hurt. If the groomer accidentally clips the quick too short and the nails bleed, that hurts. So those bad experiences can have long-lasting effects. So that's what Susan's saying here. He's had a couple bad experiences and she's trying to groom him and do his nails, but now he's snapping at her. So we would work through a process to sort of start from square one, teach him positive associations with implements. So if clipping is too difficult, you might want to consider nail files. So it's a little more controlled and it's a slower process. You might be able to move from a nail file to a Dremel and not have to do actual clippers, which can be really scary for a lot of dogs if they've had bad experiences. If there is a chance of him really snapping and biting, you may want to consider muzzle training for vet procedures. I'd much rather have a dog muzzle trained and not learn that biting works than have a dog learn that in order to get out of a sticky situation that he can bite, and then the vet stops handling him. And then that dog learns moving forward that biting is a good way to get out of situations. So I'd much rather have a dog be trained to comfortably wear a muzzle to prevent biting incidents and to, prevent him from having a bite record and prevent someone from getting hurt. So I would look into that. But starting over from square one, if he's not comfortable having his nails clipped, I would go back to square one, start working on having him have a positive association with nail files. I know TAFE is nail file crew, so are we. We do lots of nail files. We do clipping also, but we are nail file 3 Sundays a month and clipping one Sunday a month. You'll see video of that on my blog post on Monday. So you can do that. You can also check out the Academy for Dog Trainers Husbandry project. They have lots of training projects or training plans for vet and grooming. That is going to be linked in my blog post on Monday as well. So you'll be able to have access to that. Those are all free training plans as well. Any other questions? We've got a couple more minutes before we wrap things up here. If not, I will throw out, in case you're not following me on Facebook, Netflix has a new show that they are in the process of putting out that is promoting a prong and shock collar trainer. And there is currently a petition to try to get Netflix to not put that show out. And Pet Professional Guild and a whole bunch of other animal organizations who are against the use of force and aversives in training are behind getting Netflix to cancel this show because it's inhumane. It's not using modern dog training methods. So I am in support of that. I am not supporting this new show. We spent 10 years trying to get Cesar Millan off the air, and now this new guy is going to try to get on the air. So if you are interested, we're going to put the link to that petition, the change.org petition, in the chat so that you can sign that and get your name on there. We do not need more shock and prong collar trainers getting media attention. We need less of that. Okay, we are at time here. So I hope you like the new format. If you've got any suggestions for upcoming themes for lives that you would like me to talk about, I am certainly open to that. I was thinking about doing one in the next couple of weeks about the new ESA airline changes and talking about psychiatric service dogs, because I've had a couple of clients reach out to me about that. So that is sort of kicking around in my brain. But if you've got any other suggestions for topics for Q&A events, I would love to hear from you. So you can post on Facebook, you can send me a message, you can send me a message through Instagram, you can email me, you know how to find me. So I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and I thank you for joining me. Have a good night. Bye.